Okay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So we are starting the webinar now. So the webinar that we have today is on the role of technology in higher education and how we can navigate the challenges that we are facing in this post-COVID world. The speaker for the session is Mr. Harjeet Gulati from Millipixels Interactive. Now I'll hand over. So we also have Mr. Atri from MMU. The speaker for the session is Mr. Harjeet Gulati from Millipixels Interactive. Now I'll hand over.
Hello.
We also have Mr. Atri from. Hello, there's some issue at my end, please. Sorry.
There's a problem of.
Yeah, so about the webinar.
Yeah.
So.
Can I come in, Gagan?
There's some issue at my end, it seems. Yeah, so about the webinar. So I'll brief you about the webinar, how it will work. So if anybody has any queries, they can raise their hands, and one of our teammates will get in touch with you. And we'll also have polls running in between. We have 4 to 5 polls. We'll try to make the session interactive. Now I'll hand it over to Mr. Atri to start the session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gagan. Respectables, Chairperson US Soul, Panjab University, Chandigarh, Professor Mahima Verma, Registrar Maharishi Markandeshwar University, Professor Raman Gupta, Dean Academic Affairs, MMU, Professor Praveen Alavalia, Senior Professor from the Panjab Universities and from the MMU and from the other institutions. Good morning to all of you. As this is a critical time for all of us due to lethal coronavirus, but hope you all are keeping well and safe. We, the academicians, are the pillar of the nations. Therefore, we cannot afford to hold back our mission to enlighten selves and others due to any reason that may be deadly corona. Today, we have assembled here to explore the different technological avenues for the higher education post-COVID era. For the purpose, University School of Open Learning, Panjab University, Chandigarh, and Maharishi Markandeshwar University has planned this webinar on navigating challenges in post-COVID world and role of technology in higher education, where we are going to have solutions to our number of unsolved queries, like which is the best technology used for online education, how we can make use of these technologies for better result, and like such questions. I hope, and I'm sure that we're going to have very learning experience out of this. Now, today we have with us very renowned sociologist, Professor Madhurima Verma. She's the chairperson of USOL, Panjab University, Chandigarh. He's got the 30 years of experience in teaching and research as well. Professor Verma has involved in number of practices that are led to the upliftment of the already reputed department of the Panjab University, Chandigarh, USOL. Now, I would like to invite Professor Madhurima to please come over and extend its welcome address and opening remarks. Professor Madhurima. Professor Madhurima is there?
Yes, I am there. Good morning.
Yeah, please, ma'am, please come over.
Good morning, one and all. You are all aware that COVID-19 has been the most challenging and disruptive situation that our generation has ever faced. It has set new ways of living and also created new opportunities in various facets. And we are aligned with this normal. Like many other sectors, the education sector has been severely impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. Most of the countries around the world have closed down their educational institutions. In this period of uncertainty, technology has come to the rescue of educational institutions. The main purpose is to minimize this disruption in the learning process. Today's lecture on role of technology in higher education, navigating challenges in post-COVID world by Mr. Harjeet Gulati is one such step. I welcome Mr. Harjeet Singh, CEO of Millipixels Interactive LLP. I take pride in informing you that he is an alumni of Panjab University. He has been at forefront of digital innovation, helping his clients adapt, build, and grow their businesses across the globe. From startups to global corporations like Google and McGraw-Hill, he has an excellent record of delivering innovative solutions. I'm sure we all shall have a great learning experience. I once again welcome all the participants, registrar, dean academic affairs, MMU, and the members of different colleges, universities, and students who have joined the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for such a kind words. Now I would like to invite one of the dynamic and young researcher and teachers, Professor Parveen Alavalia. He's a Dean Academic Affairs at Maharishi Markandeya University, Sadopur, Ambala. He also have the additional charge of IQAC. I request him to please come over and give a special remark. Dr. Alavali.
Yeah, good morning. I think I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, Dr. Alavali, go ahead.
Hello.
You're audible, Dr. Alavali. Please go ahead.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Good morning, all of you. Good morning, all the participants. So, on behalf of MMU University Sadopur, I welcome all the panelists, especially Dr. Madhurima, and all the participants to this webinar. I also welcome our speaker, Mr. Harjeet Gulati, CEO Millipixels. This MMU University Sadopur was initially started as Group of Institutions in 2010 with the courses in the areas of engineering and technology and management. The University Sadopur constitutes Group of Institutions, School of Architecture, and School of Pharmacy. The university was accredited by NAC in the year 2016. Currently, the university is offering courses of Bachelor of Pharmacy, Bachelor of Architecture, BSc Honours in Agriculture, BCom, BBA, BCA, BSc in Design, Master of Architecture, MSc in Physics, Chemistry, Mathematics, BA in Journalism and Mass Communication, Postgraduate Diploma in Journalism and Mass Communication, and Ph.D. Now, some other institutions which are established by the trust include a deemed university at Mulana in Ambala, then International Schools at Sadopur, Karnal, and Mulana, and other state private university at Solan in Himachal Pradesh. This university at Solan in Himachal Pradesh consists of a constituent institutions of medical course, which has the privilege of being the first medical institute in private sector in Himachal Pradesh. The trust, which is the Maharishi Markandeya Trust, also has the privilege of establishing the first engineering college, the first medical college, and first deemed to be university under the private sector in Haryana. Well, dear participants, this is all about the brief introduction about the management and the university. Now, I would like to invite Dr. L.K. Atri, Training and Placement Officer, University Sadopur, take the webinar forward, and I hope you have a nice interacting session. So, Dr. Atri, please take over this forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for such a kind word. Now, without much delay, I just wanted to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Harjeet Gulati. Mr. Harjeet Gulati is a very dynamic, young, prodigal the person. I'm very fortunate that we had a great time when we both have joined BSc honors in Panjab University. Thereafter, he jumped to the MBA. He did an MBA from UBS department. With a stellar career spanning 22 years, Harjeet has been in the forefront of digital innovation, helping clients adapt, build, grow their business across the globe. From startup to the global corporations like Google, McGraw-Hill, he has a track record of delivering innovations that are few unparalleled expertise. Over the course of his career, he has engaged with clients in the design and delivery of complex enterprise system as well as social media initiative. His thought leadership in the user experience is something a client have benefited from tremendously. He is an avid speaker, prolific photographer, digital artist, and his abiding interest in social media see him contribute to the Yahoo O'Reilly Facebook designing and social interface. So with such a huge qualities, no, I will not delay much more and invite Mr. Harjeet Gulati to please come over and give his keynote lecture. Mr. Gulati, please come over.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Dr. Atri, Dr. Verma, Ahluwalia. It's a great privilege to be here today, addressing what I'm looking at as a nice gathering of over 325 people that have joined us today. We are looking at a situation which we haven't seen before. If you look at the last, I'd say 90 days, the entire world seems to have changed. And I'll quote, there's this quote that Vladimir Lenin had, which simply said that there are decades where nothing happens. And then there are weeks when decades happen. What we are faced with today is no less than the change that we would have probably seen in decades that's happening in a matter of weeks. We've had the world move from a go as normal thing. I mean, February, nobody was really bothered about COVID. Nobody knew what was happening. Even if we knew, it was like, oh, it's in China, it's in South Korea, it's in a few countries. We are far away from it. We don't have any interaction with that. But I think there are three things that have been extremely important for us. Looking at the way the change has been brought about. First has been the scale and scope of the extent of disruptions this has caused across multiple sectors of the economy, and it's extended deep. There even villages are not safe from the virus and the impacts it has. But perhaps more important has been the speed at which this change has been brought about. As an example, on 1st of March, there were 6 countries in lockdown. And, it was still kind of like, okay, well, will it impact us? Maybe not. But as we moved forward towards the end of March, we had 187 countries in lockdown. And we moved on into April. We are into May, going into June. We don't know how long this is going to actually last. So extremely important for us to understand what impact it has caused on a sector which I believe is at the center of everything that we are doing, and that's education. And very important for us to also understand how it has impacted students. What has been the scope of that change that it has caused, and perhaps try and make sense of that impact in terms of numbers. And as if UNESCO estimates of April 2020, 80%, 87% of the number of students worldwide have been impacted, which is about 1.6 billion students. Now, I know a lot of them are going to be in primary education, vast majority actually, but the effects we've got on secondary and tertiary education is no less. And if we specifically talk about the Indian context, we've got 1.4 million schools that we have in the country, almost 40,000 institutes of higher education, and we've got 227 million students that are impacted. I mean, just the scope and scale of this disruption is massive. What it is also doing at the same time is that it's causing us to look at a lot of other elements to it. Like, we've got to look at education as the single largest sector and the single largest employment provider in terms of worldwide. I think retail and education are the largest. Education is one of the largest. There are 35 million, in India that are provided direct employment by education sector. And then if you talk about the indirect employment, that's about 10 million people. So you're looking at 4.5 crore people really being employed by the education sector. And if you look at the disruption and the fact that if you look at humanitarian aid, only 3% is actually spent on education. And this is a UNESCO figure, not something that I can talk about. But the important part here is that we've got a lot of challenges that educators are facing. And most of you are educators, I believe almost all. And you're well versed with these challenges. And I think that challenge really starts at the very core and the very root of how we are looking at this change. You're looking at the nature of learning itself that is changing. You are typically talking about an audience right now, the students that are there, they're millennials, post-millennials. This is an audience which has grown up in a world filled with technology. I mean, they've grown up with internet all around them. They've not known a world without internet. Millennials, I mean, any person born after about 95 knows about the internet. When he or she was growing up, they were looking at internet and they were finding information on that, and they've seen the growth of the platform as it is. And again, as we've moved forward the last 10 years, the growth of the smartphone that has happened. I mean, you've got post millennials which have adapted to this environment of using smartphones more than anybody else. I mean, we were probably in you know we I remember I was 35 when I first used a smartphone, maybe 32, 35. And you have kids today which are learning on smartphones. Teaching to this audience is anyway complex. You already are aware of that. You've been dealing with them, and now these guys have just moved offline from the classroom, and they've gone on the online world where all of you are connected using either video conferencing or howsoever. And for these millennials and post millennial students, technology comes very naturally. And I think our model now has to change from a retrieval based learning to more of how you apply that learning and how you use critical reasoning, for instance, how you develop those skills in these students. And that probably has to be something we have to address right away, considering the pace at which we are changing. You're also looking at a very important element of personalization of learning. Learning has been more median centric, so you would always be teaching kids in class, and you would have 20, 30, 40, 50 of them in the lecture room, and you would generally try and adapt the pace of your teaching to the median student. So the bright ones would feel kind of left out, and the ones which were lower down the grade, they would not understand. So you could not do much there. And what technology is today allowing you to do is that now you can look at the actual uptake of every single student in your online class. You can ask very pointed questions. You can look at, for instance, if in your class of 50, or for that matter, if you're using something called as those massively online courses that you have, the MOOCs that we call, you can be teaching to a class of 50,000. And if you have that sort of an environment and you're looking at maybe 20,000 or 200 people in your class, or 500 are not understanding a concept, you can immediately tailor your learning to the needs of those students. And I think that in itself is a very major change in terms of how we use technology in learning. And the change is just brought about in such a sudden manner for all of us. We are looking at curriculum development, for instance. Now, we were very happy getting the students to go read from a textbook. We had our whiteboards and our blackboards and the classroom environment, one-to-one interaction. You were able to take this feedback to curriculum developers, and you were able to develop those curricula. But you're also realizing the fact that the students today are learning from global resources. I mean, I can today in India, sitting in India, I can take a course from Stanford or MIT or Johns Hopkins, for that matter. I can take those sessions. I can learn directly from the best faculty. MBA students, for instance, I know they've been taking classes directly from Harvard, sitting anywhere in the world, really, in the remotest corners of the planet. And when you have that as a competition, the challenge for teachers becomes a lot higher, because now you're competing in a manner against people who are famous. The curriculum that probably MIT has, the engineering colleges in India would need to make sure that their curriculum is up to that level. And it's becoming increasingly important for us to also align all of this with the governance standards we've got. So if there's a board, like for schools, you've got CBSE or ICSE. So you've got those elements that are extremely important that you need to look at. Beyond the development of curriculum, I think if we take the next step, we're talking about courseware design. That in itself has to be extremely interactive. You're not just using textbooks. I've had a chance of working a lot with McGraw-Hill in terms of their Connect platform and rolling it out to students and teachers alike, in which the intention is to go beyond the textbook and go beyond the ebook that we all know. It's a complete learning management system that that students and teachers both use to enhance the learning in a very outcome focused manner. So they're focused on outcomes. What is the outcome I'm looking to drive with this lecture or with this course? And they're actually being able to measure all of that. Extremely important. But this is also bringing across a very sharp skill gap that teachers have, and it's a worldwide phenomena. I think we in India probably are a little better in terms of our skills in terms of technology, as opposed to other countries. I mean, you'd be surprised I'd say I'd put Indian teachers a little above teachers in the US in terms of their adaptability and in terms of their usage of newer technologies, of newer forms of teaching, and just developing the kind of courseware that the new online environments actually need. So, but that does not leave everything. I mean, you're just getting into a field where a lot of people don't know what is. We talk of the new normal. All of us are doing that. But what are the guiding frameworks for this new normal? Nobody has that right now. And teachers being at the forefront of education, I think they have to be the ones to actually start looking at developing those standards of education, of delivery, of courseware development, of curriculum development, everything. And it's a big challenge. And on top of that, you've got a wide choice in terms of the kind of technology platforms that you can actually use. So being able to be adept at everything is impossible, but you still need to be able to get that. And you have a situation where right now we are in a lockdown kind of environment. You're just having to move your classroom to Zoom sessions. Maybe many of the teachers have done that, and it's a difficult environment. Being on video, and if we were having the seminar in a live session, it would be different in terms of its interactivity. Yes, many of you might not have been able to join at short notice or being able to travel so much. So there is an advantage of technology, but there's also the disadvantage of getting away a little bit from that face-to-face interaction, and that cannot be something that we can't do. In terms of the skills that you have right now, I think they were honed for a more face-to-face interaction. They were not designed for an online kind of an environment, and this is a gap that we have to navigate, and we have to do that pretty quickly, because today there is one virus, and I believe in March there was a second news of a virus spreading called a hantavirus. You don't know when the next one comes across. So you are looking at a situation where you're running in a classroom kind of an instruction one day, and the very next day you are you're moving offline on the online world. You're moving on to Zoom, or you're moving on to other learning management systems, and your kids are all spread across homes, and they're trying to access their resources from their homes. So extremely important for us to look at the skill gap, look at the ways to mitigate that, and this is something that we absolutely have to focus on. There's another very profound change that's happening over the last, I'd say, about 5 years, and that is the inclusion of artificial intelligence in learning. And this is something that you're going to have to grapple with in the next year or a couple of years, because what we are looking at today are technologies which are helping teachers evaluate their students while they're delivering. As I mentioned, you no longer have to teach just the median student, the average student, and then make sure that the remaining ones are all catching up. Today you can tailor your curriculum to address the needs of the students who are exceptionally bright and they're rushing through their course, and at the very same time you can tailor that same course to the needs of an average or a below average student who has difficulty grasping some of the concepts. So it's no longer a one-to-many kind of an instructional mode. You're moving into a one-to-one, very personalized mode of training. And this, I believe, is a very fundamental change in education, in the way that we are conducting education and the way we are conducting research, all of that. And once you deliver your instruction, the next element that's very important is testing. How do you test and how do you assess progress? As you move from the classroom mode to the online mode, how do you do that assessment? I mean, in classroom, you can say, well, here are a set of questions. Go ahead, respond to these questions, and based on the quality of responses, we'll evaluate you. We'll give you marks. So whether you're talking of summative, outcome focused kind of assessment, or norm referenced, or the criterion referenced, or ipsative, I mean, whatever model you take for assessment, you now have to move that online. That is a difficult challenge in itself, because you no longer have the luxury of telling your students that no books are allowed. Now it's an open book situation. So you can't have a memorization test. That is not relevant today. What is going to be more relevant for students also is that they are going to be tested on how they apply these skills. I think this is another very, very important element that we have to look at. We have to develop critical reasoning in those students, and really technology there is playing its part in terms of helping accelerate that shift from a rote based learning into a more more application based or critical reasoning development based learning. And this is something that we have to do. And in all of this, of course, you're looking at security issues, you're looking at confidentiality elements in terms of testing. You can have one-to-one conversations. The world has just gotten a little more complex for us. And on top of that, I know that the education system in itself it's not just for teaching. I mean, students, when they come on to a college, there's a sense of belonging to that community. That learning cannot be supplanted, or you can't just wish it away. You can't say, well, now you just go online and hope that learning is going to be the same. I think we are going to have to focus on outcomes, and it'll take some time for us to have that research and the results come in terms of whether we are successfully navigating from this classroom mode into the online mode. What are the challenges we've faced? What has been the impact of these challenges on outcomes? And we have to adjust to that. So that community support element, that's very important in any school participation or college participation. I mean, we are social animals. And just being devoid of that interaction and switching that into an online mode where you've got maybe 25 or 40 or 80 windows or 80 videos open in front of you, it's not the same as sitting with three of your best friends and maybe discussing something, or going to the library reading room. I remember countless hours spent with Dr. Atri. He wasn't a doctor then, of course, and some of my friends in the reading room of the Panjab University Library. I think, can an online mode replace that? I don't think so, at least for my generation. But as we look at the millennials, the challenges are different, and we have to adapt to that as well. We also know that if you talk about the primary education, schools are a very important part of the national childcare services as well. The ability for you as a government to feed the right nutrition to children is important. So where 50 years ago you maybe had 40% of kids going to school, today you have more than 90%. And that's that universal education and the right to education that we've got. I think that's making some of those things easier. So definitely important for us in terms of adapting to these challenges. But there's a question that always comes in. E-learning has been around forever. I mean, last 15, 20 years, we've heard of e-learning. Most of us probably have heard of that. There are platforms that you go on and you create your course and you deliver. So in a nutshell, the answer is yes. E-learning has been around. There's a but there. You have some challenges that you need to be mindful of. Traditional e-learning has been very unengaging, passive. Here are a set of videos. Go watch at your own pace. That's what instructors are telling their students in a conventional e-learning model. And they're saying, okay, watch this, answer a few questions, have some chats, and this is this has been the way that e-learning has been conducted. But is it as good as doing this in a classroom? I think that's going to be extremely difficult. There is no interactivity in that mode, and when you lack interactivity, you lack engagement. When you lack engagement, I am definitely certain you're going to have the next step, which is a lack of outcomes. The linkage between what you're training, how that is being received, how you're testing for that, and what outcome you're driving from that, I think that is that's certainly missing there. And online learning probably is best suited for short-term skill-based learning. You want to get a skill, you want to figure out how to share your screen on Zoom. You can go to YouTube, get a video, spend 2 minutes on it. It's great. You wouldn't go to a classroom for that kind of an instruction. But if you look at formal education the way we are looking at it, I think it's going to be very difficult there. And the other challenge on top of that is that delivery is entirely non-contextual. It's like, as I mentioned, it's one size fits all. So I'm training somebody right now as if everybody is the same, but that doesn't work. So you can't create different videos for different people. And that is a challenge in conventional learning. There's no connect with the audience, of course, even though you might have some kind of a video interaction. I don't think it really replaces the kind of connect you have in the classroom. And so extremely important for us to look at that. And then, of course, the testing and the assessment are not aligned. As I mentioned, I mean, memorization tests and assessments just don't work in this environment. You've got books that are open, and the amount of rigor that you need in assessment has been missing. And so there are challenges that we've faced in the traditional e-learning platform. And what has been our approach to solve this in the COVID crisis that we've seen? Most of the students and teachers in classrooms, they've started using Zoom, or some have started using Skype or WhatsApp or Google Meet. Some have started using Microsoft Teams. But this is just one element of learning. Interaction isn't learning in itself. There's obviously the element of as one of our participants has pointed out, there's an element of convenience that the online assessments has, but that convenience does not supplant the rigor. I think they're two separate things altogether. You need convenience for students, all right, but you also need rigor. You need to be able to tell whether a student has grasped the fundamentals that you're trying to teach, or the outcome is what you wanted it to be. So you have to find a mix there. And my intention of this session so far has been to introduce some of the challenges we are seeing and how we're trying to sort of grapple with this space. I mean, in March, everything closed down. April, we were grappling with, like, how do I get back in? How do I start? And now we've started with these tools that we're seeing. And we're seeing the challenges also. There are technical challenges. One of the participants very rightly mentioned just now that remote areas and remote situations, I mean, students are unable to access, and I'll address that in one of the slides here. It's a very important point that we're making today. You cannot assume that everybody has internet connectivity at the level you want it at. I mean, as of now, the biggest risk this webinar has is if my internet connection were to suddenly go away, what would happen? At that point, it would, you'd just lose connect, and then everybody's sitting idle until it comes back up again. And that's a risk. And that's a risk for learning as well. And we've got to have, ways to mitigate that risk also. So extremely important as we're looking at these things also to look at, that the ones that you're using right now, these are not the only ways. And so you've got the changing e-learning landscape, which is a lot of things that you've got. So it's got, things like, for instance, let me just go back up in on the slide there. So you've got engaged, very active learning, where you're engaging the students a little more. And there are platforms that enable you to do that, where courseware development is interactive, where courseware delivery is, presented that interactively. And you also moving towards a blended mode. Now, what is a blended mode learning? I think this is simply combining the classroom instruction with what students end up doing at their homes or online. So you might have a situation where you're working, where you're in the classroom for 1 week, and for 1 week or 2 weeks you're in your home trying to solve those problems, and you have you're trying to do that, where classroom presence is not mandatory, but classroom presence certainly aids that development that we are seeking with education. And the courseware is becoming more interactive. You no longer have just passive videos. Today you've got environments, and we'll probably look at a few in a few minutes, where you can start authoring these interactive environments. You might have noticed just now, you had some questions that were posted out to you, and I'm glad almost 300 people actually answered that, in terms of, so we were able to make this a little more engaging. We were like, okay, what are you focused on, what is your education level, and we're asking questions, you guys are asking questions. It's becoming more interactive that way, and that's there. And then we are also moving from a one size fits all instruction to a more contextual, more feedback based learning, where you're looking at simply how well a student is grasping a certain concept, and how well are you able to respond to it. And one of the very important things about this age and the students that we have today, that as compared to the previous generation, please don't take that as in a negative way, but they are a lot more focused on values. They care about human rights, they care about the environment, they want to do the right thing. And we have to be, as teachers, as educators, as educationists, we have to be able to do that for them. And extremely important that our learning systems adapt, and they are geared for that kind of an environment. You also got a situation where you've got the Gen Z student we've talked about. The personalization is extremely important. I just talked about that as well. So that's something that is now accessible. It's within reach now. 15 years ago, when the e-learning platforms really started coming on the scene, personalized education wasn't even possible. I mean, they were just thinking about taking the classroom and putting it online, which didn't really work because you can't do that. And so extremely important for us to do that. The focus is now shifting, as I said, on applications, but also an important area, which is life skills. Education is outcome focused. We know that. And in some cases, like pure sciences, for instance, just the understanding of the concepts, being able to research that moving forward, I think that's extremely important, that as an outcome. But for people who are actually going to go out and search for a job or going into the industry, our education system hasn't really been geared towards producing what we'll call employable people. They've just got degrees. And the online mode that you've got right now, the way the education is moving, I think it's completely changing in terms of giving those life skills to students as well, along with the formal curricula that we've already got. And it's also the kind of new platforms that we are seeing are becoming very frictionless in their delivery. So you don't have to run through 10 places to get one thing. Everything is in one place. Your courseware is there, your assessments are there, your any interaction you're having with your peers, with your teachers, it's all there in one platform. We'll take a look at that as well. Excuse me, with that as well. And in addition to all of that, we are looking to align with standards also. So you're looking at CBSE, you're looking at ICSE for schools. Universities have a great role to play in terms of that, their standards that they follow as well. And the colleges that are affiliated to the universities obviously have to follow that element. And extremely important for us now to, I've just told you, okay, well, the new age systems are going to be able to do this, but let's take a look at probably a framework for where we are headed with these systems in the post-COVID world, I think. So I'm going to look at something that I'm going to call the modern e-learning framework. This is very different from what you would have from, about 2000 to about 2012, 13, 14. And in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a tremendous amount of change that's happened. And one change that really that it has actually brought about, it has been the bandwidth. If you look at the rural and urban divide, it's been significant. What we take for granted in urban areas is not even accessible to people in remote areas. I mean, imagine somebody coming in from a remote area in Himachal, for instance, to Chandigarh to study, or to New Delhi. I mean, and he's had to go back to his native place because of the lockdown. How do we expect him to be on par with someone who's in the city, has access to maybe a gigabit or 100 Mbps or a 500 Mbps kind of a line. We can't compare the two. And so the challenge there really is, that we have to push our governments, and that is happening across the world, to improve the internet connectivity and the backbone that the country has. In India, we've made, I think, some rapid strides in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of not only the landline backbone that we've got in terms of the fiber backbone we have in India, but also the access in terms of wireless access to 4G and other services. And come the next few years, I think we're going to see a 5G rollout as well. So that access in terms of bandwidth is going to become more and more a problem that we would have solved. But that still does not leave out things like you need to have basic access to basic services, like you would have electricity. That's such a basic requirement. And you would have situations where there is no electricity, there is a power cut. What is internet going to do in that case? So there, the ability for you to access things on your mobile is coming in handy. And so we are solving those problems. It's not that we are not, but it's good to be mindful of those. The second element of any framework has to be immediacy. How immediate it is for me to get in touch with the student as a teacher. If it's on the right side, you'll see a very high immediacy. On the left axis, you'll see very low immediacy. And now what this has given us is it's given us a quadrant. On the top right, you have high bandwidth, high immediacy. On the bottom, like we've got, is a low immediacy, low bandwidth. And what are the modes that you've got that you should probably be using in this sort of a situation? Is simple discussion boards, email. It works well. If there's low access, the bandwidth is low, email would work well. Discussion boards, which are asynchronous, they work very well. You can have readings that could be posted online, and you could use that as well. And if immediacy is low, that is, you don't want to get in touch with the student that much, you have other modes. You can pre-record video, like what you're doing with YouTube, for instance, or Vimeo, or any of these video platforms. You're recording video, students are consuming video, but they're doing it at their own pace. It is not necessary for us to be in touch at the same time. But if that were the case, that you needed to get in touch with the students at the same time, and in a very immediate manner, and the bandwidth was low, what are the options? I think there are just a couple of them. One is a group chat. That's the kind of thing that would work very well, because it enables you to get in touch with the learner in a very quick manner. And then from that point on, interaction is entirely based off of the bandwidth that you've got. And if it's low, it takes a bit of time. You can start, I don't know how many of you have actually worked with Google Docs or any of these collaborative document environments. You can start editing a document on your end. It can be shared and accessed by other people on the other end in a collaborative manner. And that's a great way to do it when you have high immediacy needs, but low bandwidth. And then you've got video conferences and audio conferences, which are great when when you've got very high bandwidth. And unfortunately, we actually started with video conference. We started with Zoom, and we started with Google Hangouts or Google Meet or Skype group conferences or Microsoft Team conferences. And it had a bit of a challenge. Some people were not able to access. Some people had audio issues. Some people had video issues. So there's that platform element to it also. And Zoom just made it a bit easier to conduct that. And that's why it's in use. Otherwise, video conference platforms have been around for almost 15 years now. We've just not used them until this point. And so this is roughly a framework that we would need any e-learning, anything that we've got in terms of the e-learning infrastructure to have that. And it's probably informative at this point to look at some of these e-learning platforms. Let's take a look at some of the common prominent names, and there are hundreds of these. I possibly can't cover that in a session that lasts 30-40 minutes, but it is just to introduce you to the kind of modes we are seeing in terms of kind of innovation we are seeing in technology and what we call EdTech or education technology, in terms of being able to service the needs that the education sector has focused. And one of the first one is Google Classroom. I don't know how many of you have actually accessed it, but if you search for Google Classroom, this allows you to very quickly create courseware. It enables you to grade people. It enables you to create your own classes, the class schedule, shared calendars, all the Google documents that you've got. All of that is really a part of it. The course resources, everything is in one place. You can take a video from YouTube, post it for your class in just a simple link paste. You got a Google document, you want to expose it to your class, you can just a simple way to do that. You can assess, and you can also see that if you gave an assignment, for instance, how many have actually submitted that assignment, how many have not. And this combined with Google Meet enables you to conduct your classrooms in a very efficient manner. And so, and again, this is, as you'd probably see on the left side, this is also accessible on the mobile devices, and Android being common one. I think that's an important element for us as well. So a great platform for you to start with. It's largely free for smaller usage. For large institutional usage, of course, all of these softwares would have some kind of an issue. So that's something that's there. And you've got the other element, which is right now I'm going to go on to the second one, which is, it's been a platform that's been around for almost 15, 16 years. It's called Moodle. It's an open source, which basically means it's free. You can even get the source code and modify that platform, and it's undergone a great amount of transformation. It looked really awful and very, very difficult to work with about 5, 8, 10 years ago, roughly. It was very, very difficult to work with, but in the last 5 or 6 years, they've made great changes to the platform. This is something you can download today, play around with it, and start, if you've got a college or a school that needs to go online with their courseware, this is probably one of the best options you've got without any cost. So extremely important that you look at these options. You've got others like Canvas. Again, all of them will have a different focus. So where Google Classroom is more about integrating the Google infrastructure, and Moodle is all about the free and access and giving you generic features of e-learning. There are others which are more focused on, for instance, courseware development. There are going to be others which are more focused on learning paths that students are taking, and being able to, sort of guide students through different learning paths based on the responses they have and based on the kind of assessments we are running. There are others which are completely testing focused. So again, the scale at which they are deployed is also different. The cost range is different. And so you're looking at these tools like Canvas, for instance, which are they're comprehensive, enable you to create groups of your own, publish your courseware, have a variety of options that you will not have. And then they also they differ in terms of their compliance to standards of education, like SCORM compliance is important in terms of publishing of content for courseware, especially in the US, less so in India. But that these are the platforms which actually allow you to do that. You've got a very important platform called Blackboard, used by large universities, colleges. I know a lot of universities in and around Chandigarh are actually starting to use this. It's a very powerful platform, but it's also one of the more costliest to implement. And so you're going to have to look at a variety of elements, like how skilled are you with using these tools? Is it something that you want to deploy just to get some basic instruction online, or are you looking to do more advanced things? So in that term, I think it's extremely important. You're looking at another tool called Microsoft 365, which is being used right now in many of the schools, and I think a couple of colleges here as well, where they're trying to get your school classes. I mean, they're just trying to avoid disruption because of the lockdown and get the classes going, and they've been able to do that. So students get their coursework online, they've got their own notebooks online, their assessments and grading is online, and they can access that at any point in time. So they're this is a kind of system that they've built up as well. And so these platforms also coming in as well. And then of course there are so many others which are more focused on what I'll call user experience. So they're really easy to work with, not too many features, but really easy to work with. Functional, very functional, but not too many features to confuse everybody. And then there are the more, I'd say, complex ones. They're extremely well used in the industry, and that's something that we've got. And I believe all of this has to lead to the way forward for us. One, we cannot continue to teach the way we have. There are challenges. Some of you are pointing that out. I'm looking at the Q&A that's happening right now. Some of those challenges are really, really big. I cannot, sit in front of you here and say I've solved all the challenges and here is everything. I think we're going to have to collaborate to solve these challenges. We're going to have to realize, I think the challenges you realize as teachers and the challenges we realize as technologists, I think there has to be an amalgamation of the two, and we're going to find solutions for that. But there are some broad frameworks that are important. And that framework that I'm looking at in terms of moving forward has to be, number one, the time has now come for personalized education. We can no longer, just have median, education that is targeted towards a median student. You can today tailor your courseware to all, sections of the students you've got. You can, tailor to the most bright students, and you can tailor to the ones who are slow in terms of their uptake. You need accessibility. Some of you have very rightly pointed out in Q&A even right now that we are focused too much on urban infrastructures. We are not focused so much on rural, and there has to be a way to do that. And one of the important ways that it can be done, of course, is that bandwidth and internet access has to be more like a fundamental right for us moving forward. Because if that is lacking, I think everything else falls down, because that's the only way you have that you can connect with the outside world in a situation like we've got today. I can't be in front of you in a physical form. So we get on a webinar, we organize that, and we are able to talk, and we're able to sort of exchange these ideas. But accessibility has to be one of the guiding forces for whatever LMS or whatever learning management framework we build for our institutions. It has to be accessible to students who are disadvantaged, who are in rural areas, because without them, again, you would have too much of a digital divide happening. We can't afford that. So that's an element of affordability. I mean, affordability here is mentioned in more in terms of cost. It has to be affordable. Government, has to pitch in as well. But we also have to pitch in and make sure that whatever solutions we build have to be affordable for a wider audience. We can't create white elephants in education, especially. The more widely accessed this education and these platforms are, better outcomes we're going to see as a society. And we've got Dr. Verma and many other sociologists probably here, and they'll attest to that fact. So affordability is extremely important for us. Being able to turn out world-class courseware is extremely important for us. We can't have the same old way where we'd have, okay, pick up this textbook and learn from that. Students are not going to be content with it. They will go on the internet, they'll search for better representations of that. And so you can't have a situation where your coursework is not matching up, because your students would certainly give it a thumbs down. And we can't afford that as well. So courseware has to become world-class. We have to ensure, as I said, diversity of students, and that's an extremely important element. We can't be exclusivist in our approach to education. It has to permeate down to the masses. And I think this is something that's extremely important for us, that we have right in front of us. We also have to ensure that there is a level of choice that students have available. I mean, today, if you're teaching a subject and you've got 4 different levels at which that subject can be taken, the students would like that choice. The more advanced student would want to take the advanced course. And so we have to be able to tailor the entire learning environment to support that student. Whereas a student who's lagging behind a little bit, for whatever reasons, he should be able to start at a lower level and then work his way up those grades. And so this probably is extremely important as a framework that we have. So we are looking at the technology side of things, but we're also looking at the education side of things, because end of the day, what's going to drive outcomes is not technology alone. It is going to be the amalgamation of technology with the needs of the educationists and the insights that educationists and teachers have in being able to solve these greater challenges that we are looking at. So in effect, we are really looking at this focus on teachers. Physical infrastructure has been important, no doubt about it. But what has COVID crisis done is that it's focused now everybody's attention on the teachers. Who is the teacher? What pain is the teacher taking in the growth of that student? And so, very important for us to look at that. And you know, it needs new skills, certainly. So you will have to spend some time, energy in terms of, you know, retooling yourself and reskilling yourself. It has to be done. There's no alternative to it. You've got to be more attuned with the progress of technology. So where we are subject matter experts in one area, um, we can't leave technology at all. It's pervasive, and it's going to become more pervasive as we move forward. So we can't, you know, hope that we are working with a certain platform, that platform is going to remain the same 3 years down the line or 2 years down the line. They may have a new version. And so you have to continually adapt yourself and learn and grow, and in the process, I believe, make the students who depend on you grow as well. And I think there's no bigger responsibility than teachers are playing at this point. And for that, I'd like to end this session with a note of thank you for all the work that you're doing, and you know, all that. Thank you so much for listening in attentively. I think we've questionnaires, that question answers we probably get into right now. Dr. Atri, you may want to take some.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Harjeet. It's a very informative talk as far as this title is concerned. I think it's really a very useful tour to the innovative technological work, which could be best used in the education sector. Side by side, I'm very happy to announce that the attendees were very much attending the institute, because we have got a number of questions side by side, and I would like to share with you some of the questions which are important, and kindly open it and give your answers for that.
Sure.
The first question that is from Jyoti Malik. What's the impact of lockdown on teachers or other faculty members of the school as well as college? Because now there's of course, an impact on the teachers. Would you like to say something about this?
I think the impact has been tremendous. It's not a small impact by any standard, but I also would not like to jump the gun here. I think you know, Dr. Verma is here. She can probably address this question better. But to me, if I talk about as a technologist, I think number one impact has been that you've got to manage you know, your home. You've got to manage the students. I know it's difficult to manage one kid. Managing so many, it needs special skills. But there is also, in terms of teaching skill, that the question was more targeted towards. I think teaching skill is now moved from, like, you're speaking to a computer screen as opposed to speaking in a classroom, where that interaction is very personal. Moving to a computer screen is a very impersonal kind of a mode, and so that amount of feedback that you get in class, you're not able to probably get online. I think that, to me, is a big change. But I think teachers really are the ones that that would be able to better illustrate what kind of challenges that they face during this time. And there's a poll that we're running as well, in terms of you know, how they're you know, how they've been impacted as well. So if Madam Verma would like to share her thoughts as well, that'll be really great.
Yeah. Professor Verma, you want to say something to this?
I would like to add something. What Mr. Gulati has said, that when this COVID situation came, we were not actually prepared that this type of a situation is going to come so soon. So with regard to technology, most of the government-run institutions were not that prepared to take up this online thing. As sir has talked about the accessibility and affordability, these are the two important issues which most of the government institutions are facing. They are not able to provide proper infrastructure with regard to online thing. As a result, teacher are they are facing a problem with regard to interacting with the students. And similarly, when we talk about the affordability and accessibility of the students with regard to distance education, as most of the students are in far flung places and where the technology they have a problem, especially with regard to the internet issue, and sometimes they do not have a smartphones. As a result, they were not able to have access to the technology and were not able to make use of the online education which the private institutions as such are doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, rightly said, ma'am. The second question, which is very relevant, asked from Dr. Ridhima Arya. She's saying that, kindly tell us something about the practical work could be through online system. Any platform for the practical work, Mr. Gulati?
There are a lot of platforms which enable you to do, what you would typically call, areas of consumer research. That is possible. But if you're looking at, for instance, pure sciences, if I need a telescope in my physics lab to do my astronomy experiments, there's no way to do that online. So that is a huge setback we've got. That's a huge negative we've got. If you've got to run, you need an electron microscope. You certainly cannot have that in your home. Those slides need to be prepared, and that experiment needs to be run in the lab. You can't have centrifuges in your home. Wherever there's a need for specialized equipment to do your research, I think that's a big drawback that technology today can't
Yeah.
solve. There are ways in which you could collaborate. You're saying that one person is sitting in the lab and five people are asking them and assigning jobs to them, and then they're posting results online. That has been done. I have personally worked for a client in South Africa where they've set up a lab, and all you do is you request the lab for certain results. But then that is not always possible. That's only very specific situations that kind of situation that is going to be possible. If you've got to prepare a slide, you've got to prepare it in the lab. You can't do that in your home. I mean, certainly you can if you've got all the tools and everything, but this is certainly a negative that we see. And when I first talked about this seminar, Dr. Atri talked about it with me. I think this was the first thing that came to the mind. How would you do your lab work in your home? You just can't. And so there have to be some ways that we can mitigate that, but no way that you can replace it.
Yeah. Another very relevant question is that Mr. Swaranjit has asked this question that in the Google Classroom, if the classroom code is enabled, does it lead to potential cybersecurity risk?
Cybersecurity risks have to be weighted against, what kind of a need you have. If you're running something that's extremely specialized, that you don't want anybody to sort of hack in that way, there are so many different ways to do that. I mean, we saw a news, I think about a month back, with a lot of Zoom sessions getting hacked. It wasn't so much about the technology as opposed to how the users were using it. Today you have a way in which you can lock a session on Zoom, and it was there even then, but people didn't know about it, and so the usage was determining cybersecurity issues. Most of the software that we've got today is end-to-end encrypted. So even if you talk on WhatsApp, your calls are end-to-end encrypted. That means nobody can just hack into it, and that's why billions of people are actually using that platform. Similar is the case with all of the ones that we are seeing today. As long as we educate ourselves in terms of using these in the right manner, taking precautions, not clicking on random links we get in emails, which probably say you'll get rich in 12 hours if you click this link. Let's not do that. We'll be relatively safe. So that's it. It is to be weighed against the need. It's got to be weighed against the kind of capabilities your software has. And of course, when you evaluate any software for that matter, whether it is Google, whether it is anybody else, every technology has a potential for getting hacked. There is no 100% hacking proof solution in the world. That just doesn't exist. So nobody can give you that, and anybody tells you that, he's probably lying. So you have to make sure that your learners are protected, especially the younger ones. You have all sorts of untoward things that have been happening in class, online classes. There are ways to prevent it. So biggest defense against that is going to be education. Just learn to use those softwares a little better, spend some more time with it, educate yourself on how can you secure that, and then educate the learners as well. And I think that together will make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. It means that we need to make more aware about this technology to make safe use. Another question that it's very good question. How to make this online learning interesting?
Well, so many different ways. I mean,
yeah. How can you make this online
learning? Well, learning is going to have a challenge always. You know, you tell somebody, do you want to play a game or do you want to learn? I have my doubts in terms of the number of people who are going to actually opt for learning right now. And you have to, you've got gamification, for instance. That's an extremely important way in which you're improving learning outcomes. You're saying, hey, you're going to get this badge if you. A lot of classes and a lot of colleges are actually doing that. So they're publishing their leaderboards in terms of, this is a badge like the best learner award. And even in the platforms I showed you, if you go on to any of these, you'll see the top learners, the ones who answered the questions quickest, or the ones who are turning in their assignments the quickest, who are very regular with classes. So they're gamifying that. They're giving them special badges. So this guy has 100% record of attendance. And that is kind of prompting them to stay more engaged. I think more than interest, it's the engagement that we have to focus on. Interest, certainly. I'm not saying it's not important. You have to be interested in what you're learning. Otherwise, learning just doesn't happen, at least as far as I'm concerned. But it's also about engagement. Sometimes you really hate the subject, and you still have to learn that. So you can use interactive modes. You can start like what we've been doing, for instance, a bit here. Have some polls, have some assignments which are more like which enable you to do a bit more groundwork than just reading a textbook. So that depends on the imagination of the teacher, really. The best teachers we remember are probably the ones that made learning very engaging experience for all of us. And I think it is no different for online. Teachers have their way of connecting with students. That magic still is the teacher, not the technology.
Yeah. Another very important question is that because this technology is always related to the students in urban areas, and what should we do with the students from the remote areas and all the students which come under RT scheme? Another question related with this, that this technology is best for the higher education, but it is not too much effective in primary and lower classes.
I think the example I gave of Microsoft 365, that actually was an example from a primary education environment where, small kids, as, they're in like first or second grade. And that was an actual screenshot that I posted where a first grade student is actually learning on that platform. And she's exceptionally, adept at using that platform. So it is helping schools now. I think as more and more schools adapt and as more and more kids get exposed to this, so you would see the impact on the primary education level as well. In terms of the question, the part of the question around, how do you get remote learners to experience the same interactivity and the same kind of model? I think, as I mentioned, the number one thing that has to be there has to be access. As if you do not have access, everything falls flat. And so that digital divide has to be done through government's effort also. But largely, I would see that even in the remotest corners today, you've got 4G connections, you've got smartphones. And I might sound elitist in that way, but it's a lot of the kids that are learning have access to that as well. Coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, we can set up special centers of learning in remote areas where you could maybe link up at the block level. You could set up centers where kids could travel to that at least and learn from there. That is one effort that you could do for economically disadvantaged kids that that we can do. But end of the day, it's about giving access. How you give that access, whether it is to their homes, whether it is to the nearest contact point, a center where multiple students can come in and access those resources, it will solve the problem. But end of the day, it's all it boils down to access. We have to ensure that people have access, and it has to be affordable access. It cannot be cost prohibitive. You can't expect kids to pay for their education in first, second, third. I mean, primary education, secondary education. I mean, this is in the society's interest to get those kids to learn and to grow. This is something that we have to ensure as a society as well. So some government pressure will certainly, putting pressure on the government will certainly help. When organizations, NGOs raise their voice on this, this is something that the government has to look at. It's something that we expect our governments to do as well, and our role there as citizens would be to ensure the government does it.
Yeah, I think, and another very important question is that I also want to know the answer of this. There's a lot of internet connectivity issues in all the areas. Can you do something for this?
Bandwidth. Bandwidth has to improve. I mean, if you're just relying on older technologies, it's not going to work. Like, our usage is expanded. Like, imagine right now you're doing video conferences across all. I mean, as I mentioned, 221 odd million students across India, and even if a fraction of them are using video conferencing, just imagine the amount of load our bandwidth has taken. So it just has to continue to increase. I mean, we are looking at 4G to 5G in the next year and a half, 2 years. We are looking at improving fiber access to homes in remote rural areas as well. There's a national mission which is already underway for that. That happens, I think these things will certainly get better moving forward. This is not a challenge that I see going on for too long.
Okay, that's good. So we'll wait for some time, then the issue will be solved.
I think it's a continuous march. You'll continue to see these things solved and new elements emerge out of that, and access getting better, faster, and our connections are very they're very unstable most of the time. So that is something that we can try removing from the infrastructure level.
Yeah. I think we should thank Mr. Gulati for justifying all the queries. We're not going for longer time. Now it's time to vote of thanks. So I'd like to invite Dr. Praveen Alavalia to please come over and extend his vote of thanks. Dr. Alavalia.
Thank you, Dr. Atri. I hope the participants have enjoyed the session. Looking at the queries, it seems that the interaction was very interacting. The participants have really enjoyed the information shared by our speaker. So first of all, I feel privileged, in fact, to thank our worthy speaker, Mr. Harjeet Gulati, for sparing his valuable time and enlightening us on the current challenging issues, where these are very challenging issues faced by our teaching fraternity, not only for the students, especially for the teachers also, who are trying to cope up with these issues of online teaching. Special thanks to Dr. Raj Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Panjab University, Dr. Harish Kumar Sharma, Vice Chancellor, MMU Sadopur, and the University School of Open Learning, Panjab University. Well, I'm also thankful to all the panelists, Dr. Madhurima Verma, Dr. L.K. Atri, Mr. Bikramjeet, Mr. Gagan, and the technical team of Millipixels. And last but not the least, thank you. I thank all the head of the departments of MMU Sadopur, head of the departments and faculty members of Panjab University and other institutions, and all the participants for participating and sharing their views during the session. Well, thank you. Keep learning and have a good day. Thank you. Thank you all.
Very thank you for those words. Thank you all for listening. We're ending the session now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, now we're going to leave the session. Thank you.